welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Amy's Choice. Oh, I'm so glad I can't wait to talk about this one. Written by Simon Ney for his only story in the series. He's a writer best known for his work on the TV show Men Behaving Badly, and is directed by Kathleen Morsehead. And this would be one of two stories that she would direct in the series. So a lot of unfamiliar territory when it comes to the Doctor Who series. This story, as the title implies, is strange because when you watch the story, it's doesn't like Amy's not a central character compared to the Doctor and Rory, but she does have a very important element in the story in which the story is like her deciding which reality is real in a sense. Now, this story was one of the most talked about stories when Series 5 came out. It is also, look at this, ready, look at this. It's one of the most highly acclaimed stories of Series 5, where people praising it when it came out, and people still praising it to this day, begging the series to reconnect with this story in some way, shape or form. But this story is also the only story of Series 5 where the silence nor the crack in time storylines are in any way, shape or form a part of the story. Now that is interesting, I find. I feel like what makes this story stand out much greater than some stories in this era, which a lot of episodes seem to suffer from, is the fact it has to tie into the arc in some way, shape or form in a way that kind of distracts the narrative of the flow. So I'm really glad to state that this story doesn't have anything to do with the Crack in Time arc. Not that the Crack in Time arc is bad perchance, but you know, I'm as I've stated multiple times in this vlog series, I'm somebody who enjoys the more singular, more solo, self-contained stories. Personally, it's just my tastes. But yeah, in terms of the overall opinion of this story, as I've stated, it's a highly beloved. Some might even consider it their favourite 11th Doctor story. Might even be their favourite story of the entire series, as especially in America, where Series 5 seemed to have thrived. Matt Smith was the first Doctor that really hit a big audience in America. So that is why, that's one of the reasons in why, despite Matt Smith being very unpopular to begin with in UK, he became massively successful in the US, and so his era is now kind of being regarded as a success, which I'm all happy for. But this story itself, it also has a lot of great writing, a lot of great directing, and a lot of great, well, probably one of the best guest stars in the entire series, which we'll get on to. But I think it's important to note as well that a lot of people have been pining for the villain of the story to return, and also people have been pining, which is kind of rare, for the writer Simon Ney to return to the series, which is awesome. I really like it when people are more interested in the writing and the directors, because I just feel like, you know, it's their hard work that gets on screen, and they sometimes get overlooked in a televised performance like this. So yeah, Simon Ney, sadly this would be his only series, his only episode so far. I'm like everybody else, I beg for his return. He would be brilliant to write in the 13th Doctor. Come on, we all want to see it. We also would want to see the villain of this story played magnificently by Toby Jones to return as well. So that's getting the behind the scenes, the everything around it out of the way. So let's talk about the story. We start off in a small little village, and seemingly time has passed. Presumably I think they mentioned 5 years have passed. Amy is now heavily pregnant, on the epicenter of giving birth. She does that thing. What's it called? It's not false pregnancy. It's what's that word? Where she starts thinking she's going to be giving birth, but then turns out to be a false alarm. And Rory is now a doctor for this small village, and his hair's grown. He has this ponytail that everybody takes the mick out of throughout the story. I love that bit. And well, all of a sudden, the TARDIS dematerializes outside their house as the Doctor reintroduces himself, and he's surprised. He's can't believe that Amy is pregnant and Rory's got a ponytail. I love the one thing that makes this story so memorable is the humour. Simon Ney, who, like I said, wrote Men's Behaving Badly, is perfect for Doctor Who humour, especially for the 11th Doctor. He works in that quirky sensibility, which, like I said, would make him a great writer for series for the 13th Doctor. Come on, it should be so obvious, but anyway. There's a bit where Amy's trying to tell the Doctor that she's pregnant, but the Doctor keeps taking the mick. It's like, oh, you've got a bump, you've eaten a planet, you've got an elephant growing out of you. And then whenever he starts calming down, the Doctor just looks at Amy and just goes, are you pregnant? I love that bit. And they go looking around the village, and there seems to be some sort of awkward energy around him as the Doctor can't really believe that they've settled down in a village that is so quiet. There seems to be no one around really, apart from a few people looking out with their windows, and the Doctor kind of gets the feeling that something is off. But for the most part, this village seems to him utterly boring and contrived, whilst Amy and Rory seem to really enjoy it here, seem to really like it. And they're sitting down and they're on this bench, seemingly in a very mundane situation, when suddenly they start falling asleep as they hear birds tweeting, and the sound gets so loud that it starts giving them this headache, which puts them to sleep. And suddenly they all wake up in the TARDIS. Seemingly Amy isn't pregnant, Rory doesn't have his long hair. They all wake up as if nothing had happened, only something had happened. The dream. They all had the exact same dream. And I love like I said, the humour in this is brilliant with the 11th Doctor. It's like, oh, I had this nightmare, it was horrible. Don't even want to think about it. It scares. He's making this whole fuss about it. It's like, you two are there, just don't ask me. It's too terrifying to even speak of. And then they're like, oh yeah, but I also had like a weird dream as well. It was, but it was not a weird dream. We were in a village and you had a ponytail and you were pregnant. Wait, how can we have the exact same dream? And then the Doctor basically reveals that he has the same dream, and all of a sudden they start hearing the sounds of birds tweeting, and they wake up in the village back where they were before, and suddenly they're like, hold on, how can we both have the exact same dream? What's going on here? And that basically kicks off the episode. That's the pre-credit sequence. Now, this storyline is really interesting. I've talked about before in the Marathon series about Back of the Ranch storytelling. For those of you who don't know, Back of the Ranch storytelling is a type of writing your plot, as a type of plotting that writers do, in which you have two plots happen simultaneously with each other. You let one story build up, and you get to the height of excitement on one plot, and then you cut to the next plot, to plot B, shall we say, and we let that build up, to that hits the point, and then you go back to plot A, and you keep bouncing off those two, keeping the enjoyment of the story very high. Many, especially fiction storytelling, use back of the range storytelling. Most famously, Star Wars does it. But what's really interesting here with this kind of plot and this kind of narrative, which we rarely get, is that not only do they are these two ranches, shall we say, are connected with the threat of the dream, but it also means that both subplots are part of the same cast. They're both the 11th Doctor, Amy, and Rory's plots, which is very fascinating. And the fact that we stay with these three characters throughout the entire story, I don't think, apart from a few little shots at the very start of the episode, we never leave the sight of at least one of the three characters, if not a majority of them. So that means that we really get a strong narrative flow with these characters, and that is a strong enough point in itself. But Simon Nay's writing in here really bounces off and has some really great little quirks and little moments, and the story is essentially Amy's got to pick on which her reality is, as she struggles every time she wakes up. She always is like, this is the real one, I can feel it, I got the baby bump, I got the thing. And when she goes into the TARDIS, she's like, this is real, why would we leave the Doctor and all that? And essentially, though we boil down to her picking the two realities, all of our characters are picking the realities, but it's basically Amy is the one that's in between, as Rory believes that the village is the real one, and the Doctor believes the TARDIS is the real one. But Amy is sort of in the middle, and it's not really a battle for which reality is real. It's the battle between which man she will choose, as she's in this conflict between Rory and the Doctor. And so we get introduced to our villain after the Doctor starts realising that something is taking control of his TARDIS, in the TARDIS part of reality, and it's going into a sun which can resonate cold, and they seem to be freezing up as they start falling into a frozen star. And we get introduced to our main villain, who just appears. He seems to have teleporting-like abilities. He reminds me a lot of the character Q from Star Trek Star Trek The Next Generation. This character is the Dream Lord, played amazingly by Toby Jones. This has got to be easily one of the best guest stars in the entire series. I think I've said that before, we're talking about Series 5, but my God, Toby Jones just has this really eerie presence, and this was really shocking back in 2010, because I've never seen him in a serious role like this before. I mainly have known him as being the voice of Dobby from Harry Potter, but I have seen him in a few other things, mainly comedy, and to see this quirky character and this quirky personality that I've known so well play this almost, not that he's a disgusting character, but he has this very sly attitude about him, and it's very almost like he's enjoying just torturing people attitude towards him, and he becomes essentially the main threat. He is the Dream Lord. He basically he's doing this seemingly out of enjoyment, or at least that's what the Doctor believes at the start of the story. He doesn't know who the Dream Lord is, but the Dream Lord seemingly knows who they all are, specifically the Doctor, and it seemingly claims to be him and the Doctor know each other since almost the very beginning, or at least they've known each other for a long while. And the Dream Lord basically seems to be doing this out of enjoyment. And what he does, he gives them two realities, two threats to conquer. In this world, it's the frozen sun. In the Ledworth little village, it'll be something else, which we'll get introduced to later on. And essentially, if you die in the world that is a dream, then you get woken up and you come to life. However, if you die in real life, you die. And that's the obvious. And he's very sly. I like how he's very this story does a lot for his character, surprisingly enough. Despite him having very little and being a very mysterious character, he has this very he's not afraid of saying what he he wants to say, and so he kind of pushes the Doctor to try and find the solution. He seems to be enjoying Amy's pain of picking the Doctor or Rory, and he seems to love the fact that he can just take the mick out of Rory. There's a great moment later on where the Doctor tells the Dream Lord to leave her alone, and the Dream Lord really just thrives in it, and he's just like, oh, I love it when you do that, leave her alone. Whereas Rory then says, it's like, yeah, it's not impressive really when you do it. And here's a great, because he's kind of pushing Amy to pick the Doctor, because he's kind of building up the Doctor of being this amazing, fantastic figure. You know, she left Rory to basically be with the Doctor the night before her wedding. Are you really going to give up those amazing adventures, those amazing experiences for a bumbling idiot like Rory? But not to say that, he makes the Doctor seem completely amazing with bits like there's a scene in which he basically is like, oh, Amy, he's left you in the dark and alone, like he always does, and he never seems to apologise. Oh, it's good that that he doesn't need to apologise, because he never will. He's just this kind of eerie character, and though he's mainly there for the plot, he mainly is there to set up the stakes for the character and tie in these two reality storylines together. He has got such a great presence, and Simon Ney gives him such a great humour and such this great antagonistic personality that no wonder a lot of people want to bring him back, especially with the resolution at the end of the story, which we need to talk about, and also as well we need to talk about the audience's reaction to that story, because I find that extremely interesting. But back in the Letchworth reality, our characters are like, wait, what's wrong with this reality? There's no threat seemingly as of yet, although the Doctor does notice something really odd with the elderly in the village. And I also like how at one point this old lady gives the Doctor this like sweater, and he wears it for the majority of this scene. I just love it. I don't know. I wish that throughout the entire of that part of the dream he wears it. It'd be really funny, but they didn't. There would have been some really funny commitment right there. But the characters start having these small little moments. There's a great moment where the Doctor points out Rory's ponytail, and Amy kind of laughs at Rory, and they kind of have this little giggly moment with Rory, and the Doctor and Rory seem to be having this very egotistical, because the Doctor really wants the TARDIS reality to be the real one, and Rory wants to his dream life essentially in the little village. As the Doctor points out at one point, you're now a Doctor like you've always dreamt of. There's also a great moment in which the Doctor is trying to figure out, but there's nothing challenging in this village so far. He can't really process, because he's never had to slow down before. His brain can't handle the fact that there's so much boredom, and he shouts it out. And Amy does this pretend pregnancy thing, where he's made the Doctor's white of a sheep, and when she reveals that it's a false alarm, she's like, my reality just made you white as a sheep. Don't you dare say it's boring ever again. And walks off. That is amazing. Now let's talk about Amy's character for a second, because this story is all about her connections with the two male leads. And I feel like if you take this story out of context, if you take this story on its own and you make this story about her picking the two men of her life, this story has some really great moments, some really great great character development for her. However, when you consider it part of the series, it doesn't hold up well. What do I mean by this? Some of you might even be confused by this. Just like, what the hell are you on about, Edam? You can't complain about Amy's choice. It's one of the best stories ever made. That really shows the choice that Amy has to make between the two men of her life. And that is true. There's some really great moments where, and really heartbreaking moments where Amy in the TARDIS basically is like, right, this is real and the other one is fake. Because why would we leave the Doctor? And Rory kind of starts questioning. It kind of gets a bit awkward about it. It's like, because we love each other, we want to get married, we want to, it's the night before our wedding and stuff. And then Amy's just like, it can always be the night of our wedding. And Roy's just like, well, we have to grow up sometime eventually. And then he starts fuming up. He starts getting really angry. And it's just like, no, it's seemingly now you've picked the Doctor over me. You've left me you left them on the night before a wedding with a stranger. And, it kind of puts me in an awkward position here. Do you love me or not, Amy? And that is really, really hard grounding fiction, some really ground-hearted television. But when you tie it into the overall series, it kind of makes Amy seem really unlikable in this scene, because they don't even bring up the fact that she snogged the Doctor the night before her wedding. Think about that. Think about this scene again. When you rewatch this episode, think about that scene and remember that not only is she debating about this, but she snogged the Doctor. She was about to put it in a nice way, lose herself to him on that night. How unlikable Amy seems like at that moment. But like I said, if you take that out of account, if you take the fact, if you put it in this bubble, it does still really work. And because it's Simon Ney, not Stephen Moffat writing this, I can understand, because he might have not even been aware about that subplot when this story was written. So I don't blame the story for 1 second, and I don't even consider it part of the criticism. I'm just saying, if you do think about this story in parts of it being part of the series too hard, you're going to have to be like, wait, she snogged the Doctor. There's also another scene later on where she even says to the Doctor that she's never told Rory that she loves him. And that's kind of messed up when you consider the night before her wedding. She never told him that she loved him. That's kind of strange. We also get some really great scenes. There's also a great scene in which the Dream Lord, he basically hears the Doctor planning to himself. It's like, if only we can split the team up so some of us can stay in one dream and one of us can stay in the other. And the Dream Lord accepts, and he takes Rory and the Doctor into the dream world, whilst Amy stays in the TARDIS reality. And I am kind of disappointed that Rory and the Doctor didn't get any scenes together in the dream without Amy, because I felt like that could have been a really interesting aspect, especially how this story does a lot for Rory. I seem to just remembered. Rory at this point was kind of a dorky. There was not really much about him. He felt like Mickey Smith from series 1 of Doctor Who, just a copy and paste of that. And Arthur Darwell does a fantastic job as ever. He's a great actor. He did Legends of Tomorrow after this, which is easily one of his. Basically, it's him being the Doctor. That is really cool. But anyway, back to Amy's choice. I feel like this story is where a lot of people started to really love Rory Williams. And I especially like how, unlike the Russell T Davies era, in here, the companions are allowed to continue their love. The idea of the Doctor being this amazing too bright star, if you get flame, if you get too close, it's beautiful, but when you get too close, you're going to hurt yourself kind of thing. That doesn't interrupt the characters' relationship in here. They still end up being this very heavily connected thing. And I also like how he's got this ponytail and it's kind of dorky, but he likes it. One of my favourite scenes is after Amy wakes up. He does a sacrifice for him, and you've got this really intense moments where you've got these old people attacking. That's one of the more weaker elements of this story, is that the threat in the Letchwood village is that there's old people being host to these alien entities that go around killing people by turning them into dust. It feels very cliched, very simple, but it's not part of the main narrative. The main villain here is supposed to be the Dream Lord. So I understand why it's a very simple, very basic. I'm just saying it's not the most interesting part of the story, with the exception of the visuals of seeing old people acting essentially like zombies, and Rory Williams gets to hit an old woman with a bat. Arthur Darwell must have been having a field day on that filming. But the scene I was talking about is when there's basically threats all around, and Rory decides to, in this almost seemingly in their final moments, cut his ponytail because he loves Amy over himself more, and it shows that. And despite this being a very almost comical scene, because it's a very dramatic scene and a very scene where everybody's getting threat, and they've literally stopped the moment to have a dramatic moment about a man's ponytail being cut off. But it really works, and every time I watch it, I always giggle to myself at just how ridiculous this is. But I'm also incredibly enjoying it because of how silly it is and how well it takes itself so seriously. Seriously, this is some really good writing and directing. Great stuff in here. Let's go track back and take a little bit, and we see Amy's point of view from the TARDIS reality as the Dream Lord basically seemingly is trying to get her to choose. But looking retroactively, which we'll talk about later on, he seems to be egging Amy to pick the Doctor with, it's like, well, he does mention, the Doctor abandons her, and, if you can stay with the Doctor, you will be alone and you'll never get apologised to for being treated so horribly, in a sense. But would you really give up the Doctor's life, his amazing adventures, for dorky, dull, ponytail Rory Williams? There's also a really odd bit where the Dream Lord seems to go up sexually against Amy, where it's like he's left you with me, and he reappears in like a bathrobe, and the Dream Lord is like, well, anything could happen. Almost kind of like almost rapey. I know that's not a really funny subject to talk about, but it makes the Dream Lord feel a very uncomfortable character and puts Amy in a very vulnerable state. And that is, that's what the Dream Lord is all about. So let's get to the conclusion of the story, because a lot of people have mixed feelings about this, but I personally love it. Basically, in the Letchwood reality, Rory gets killed by one of the elderly aliens, and Amy, seeing Rory turn to dust before her eyes, basically goes, right, this is the dream. Why? Is it because she can't believe it or can't believe the TARDIS? Not really. It's because Rory isn't there anymore. She doesn't want to live in a reality in which Rory doesn't exist. If this is real, if this is fake, it doesn't matter. What matters is that after she dies, she will be with Rory at the end of it. Whether that means waking up on the TARDIS in the other reality, or whether that means that she will sacrifice herself and meet him in the life after. And that is a very great moment. I love how the Doctor, not that he kind of pushes her away from this decision, but he does try to question Amy, but he's being very sensitive towards it. A lot of people always remember Matt Smith's Doctor as the quirky Doctor, the one who's been silly and a lot of times doesn't understand human emotions that well. But he is actually a very understanding Doctor, and I love that scene in which he hands over the keys to Amy and is very sensitive and very passionate about it. And you know, the Doctor really cares for Amy, but like best friends. It's almost akin to the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane. He sees her in some way as his best friend, as his equal, not a companion, despite the Dream Lord says, which again ties into the finale of the story. And so they crash the cart, and they all wake up in the TARDIS, and the Dream Lord is like, right, you have defeated me fair and square, and I shall leave you. Only for the Doctor to set the TARDIS to self-destruct. Why? Because the Dream Lord doesn't have any power over reality. The Dream Lord must be controlling them by two dreams. And so they both, the TARDIS self-destructs and they all wake up in the normal reality. Technically making this story one of the few stories in which the story is set entirely in the TARDIS, because it was all a dream. And I really love that ending. I love Amy's decision on why she just decides it. I love the twist, because it really does work well into the narrative of them both being the dreams, and the Dream Lord how only has power and only has to threaten the two of them because he couldn't, he can't have power over the real world. And so the Doctor basically explains what happens, which is the ending of the story, in which he basically reveals that there's psychic pollen. A lot of people criticise this story for the psychic pollen aspect, which was really dull and stupid of explaining how these characters got into dreams. Psychic pollen, seriously? You couldn't think of anything else other to do. They got into the TARDIS and they were heated up because the TARDIS's engines are so powerful, but it put them in this dreamlike state. And so the Doctor reveals that the Dream Lord is actually the darker aspects of the Dream Lord and of the Doctor. The Dream Lord is the dark aspect of the Doctor. He is essentially the Doctor's evil regeneration, his evil manifesting in this particular incarnation, played by Toby Jones. I don't know, maybe the 11th Doctor just hates the actor Toby Jones, and so he appeared to our characters as Toby Jones. I like to think that's the canonical explanation of that. But let's talk about this ending. There's a little bit more after this, where the Doctor pushes Amy to talk to Rory about how they died in the reality of the little village, and they have this lovely snog, probably one of the best snogs. That's a really strange thing to say. One of the best snogs in the series, and the Doctor gets a small vision of the Dream Lord, and that's basically the ending of the episode. But I want to talk about that twist that it turns out the Dream Lord is actually an evil manifestation of the Doctor. This also ties in with the idea of the Doctor having his evil manifested. This is something which also kind of ties into the classic series. For those of you who don't remember, there's the story, The Trial of the Time Lord, in which the Doctor goes to trial with an individual known as the Valeyard, who turns out to be an evil future, seemingly a future incarnation of himself that manifests in all of his evil. The Dream Lord is essentially another incarnation of the Valeyard, which is just absolutely fascinating and really cool. Essentially, this is a Valeyard story, and it does feel like it's building up to something. That the fact that we have two stories so separated dealing with this kind of concept is really cool. But let's talk about the twist that it is the Evil Doctor. I remember that during the time, as soon as people first watched this episode, as soon as the episode aired and people were talking about it on the internet, a lot of people kind of criticised the darker aspect character of the Doctor and believed it was much more interesting and much more fascinating if the Dream Lord was just this maniacal, almost unexplainable entity. But then the ending just sort of explains everything and just so happens to likely mention that he is the evil incarnation of the Doctor. Especially when you consider he's supposed to be the one that's tying the two, Amy to the two choices and tries to make this a very difficult decision for her. But then when a lot of people, seemingly on their second viewing, or after time, I think almost everyone I've talked to about this seem to agree that they've changed their mind on this, and they absolutely love, in fact they think it's now one of the best aspects of the story, that the Dream Lord is actually the Doctor. I find that really interesting, and here's my theory as to why. When you watch the story for the first time, as I state, the Dream Lord is basically a manifestation of Amy's choice, whether she will pick Rory or the Doctor, and he's making this very emotionally difficult decision for her, even more emotionally difficult. And when you watch this story, you think, right, he's basically an evil middleman trying to get the Doctor trying to get Amy to pick one side or the other. But then you watch it back and you realise something. There's a lot of scenes in which he's basically building up the Doctor. That scene in the TARDIS where he basically is like, why would you leave Rory for a silly man like this? For a silly, amazing man like this? Or would you... And there's another scene in which... and that scene was like, leave her alone. It's not as interested as when you do it. There's a lot of scenes in which the Dream Lord, maybe in a smuggish kind of way, builds up the Doctor and dismisses Rory, almost kind of trying to get Amy to pick the Doctor and make her less happy in a sense by giving up the man she loves, because she's kind of caught now in this childlike mindset of in these amazing adventures. Who needs to grow up? Who needs to get married when you can stay as a kid essentially forever and have these silly, wacky adventures? That is so fascinating. And there's also some really great hints throughout the story with the Dream Lord seemingly knows everything about the Doctor. His costume being exactly the 12th Doctor, the 11th Doctor, sorry. And I really wish he said bow ties are cool at one point. That would have been really interesting. But yeah, that twist, it's such a great twist because when you watch back, it really fits well into the story. And not only that, it gives you a completely new view set of the story. You watch this the first time, it's completely different to when you watch it the second or later on your viewings. Your first experience with this story, if you don't know the twist, is something completely different from what you view in after. And that is fascinating. Come on, that is... Can you name any other story like that? Where the twist basically changes how you watch the entire narrative afterwards in what the story is trying to convey. I find that really fascinating. So anyway, that's Amy's choice. Overall, I can understand why this is a lot of people's favourite story in the 11th Doctor era. It is one of his best written stories. Simon Ney, who is only script in the series, proves that he is easily a great writer for the series, and he really works not only as a writer for Doctor Who, but specifically this quirky environment in which Doctor Who not only thrives, but thrives very well when we have a quirky Doctor, like the 4th or the 11th or 13th. And I really wish that he would return to the series. All of our actors are giving it their top notch, with Matt Smith, Arthur Darwell, Karen Gillan, our 3 main leads being just phenomenal here, and our guest star of Toby Jones. Just what a performance. But also the narrative here is very interesting, and the back of the branch storytelling here is really fascinating, and the dreamlike environments just really tell our characters what their decision to make. What the dream here is to tell, like, what do our characters want, and Amy has to pick between the two of them. Very fascinating. I love this concept on using dreams like this in a storytelling capacity. So, Amy's Choice. Go watch it if you haven't. You're not going to be disappointed. So join me next time, where we will be going back to the K9 series with the Curse of Abinus. That's what it's called, the Curse of Abinus. So join me next time for the Curse of Abinus, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!